Breaking today, the final traces of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle from the British royal family are being erased, and this is far more significant than just the destruction of their former home.
Our clear message is being sent, and Charles is bringing in the bulldozers to bury any evidence that Harry was ever there. Why? Because the king is done. He's out. He wants to move on, and it's a very encouraging development.
The word spread through Windsor on May 28th, like wildfire. Surveyors had been called into Frogmore Cottage, not to fix it up, to tear it apart. This is the same house British taxpayers dropped £2.4 million on back in 2019, just to make Harry and Meghan comfortable. 5 bedrooms, a copper bath, the works. And now, according to The Sun, picked up by the Press Association and Sky News, the plan is to slice it right back into the small separate flats it once was. Staff quarters, bedsits for household workers. One royal source said it as plainly as palace insiders ever do. The cottage has sat completely empty for 3 years. Even Prince Andrew looked at it and said it wasn't good enough for him. And the thinking now, in that source's own words, is that maybe if they get rid of any trace of Harry and Meghan, somebody in the household might finally fancy living there. Get rid of any trace, not renovate, erase, like scrubbing a name off a door before the next person moves in.
The reason Harry is given Buckingham Palace is that Buckingham Palace is a location that is fully under control of the monarchy. And what I mean by that is that Harry and Meghan can't just invite anybody in. They can't just run things themselves. They are held under the umbrella of the authority of the monarchy. So if they have a friend come over, the friend has to go through security. The friend has to check in. The friend has to give their name. Hopefully they're actually doing that now, because during Andrew's time, they weren't as good about doing that. But every single person walking into that building should have their name down somewhere.
No bulldozer has moved yet, and we'll be straight about what's confirmed as we go. But biographer Tom Bower, someone who has watched this couple longer and colder than almost anyone, believes this one small house tells you everything about where the Sussexes have actually landed. And one question hangs over all of it. If even Andrew turned this place down, who exactly is it being cleared out for? The monarchy actually wrote about this in its own official accounts. The Sovereign Grant Report stated plainly that Frogmore Cottage has remained empty during the year. The Crown documented its own ghost house in black and white in a document the public helps fund. Here's what you need to understand about Frogmore. It was never theirs to keep. It's what's called a grace and favour home lent out by the late Queen as recognition for royal service. That's the whole deal, and it's been that way for generations. You serve the institution, you get the keys. You stop serving, the keys go back.
A furious King Charles has decided to completely remove all traces of Harry and his time at Frogmore Cottage, with seismic building work which is going to run into millions, and it will make Harry a sad and distant memory. Now, Frogmore Cottage was once the Duke's luxurious home located on the vast Windsor estate. Harry lived there during happier times when he was in the bosom of the royal family. Now he's being deleted, airbrushed away, cut out of history, all at the command of his father, King Charles.
No tenancy, no deeds, no ownership claim, just a loan tied to a job. In spring 2023, just weeks after Harry's memoir hit every bookshop in the country, those keys went back. King Charles asked them to leave. By the end of June, they were out, and the house has stood dark ever since. They even offered it to Andrew as part of efforts to move him out of Royal Lodge. He said no, sat inside his 3-0-room mansion and turned his nose up at the 5-bedroom cottage his own nephew once called home. That says everything about how the household quietly feels about the place now. Bad memories, not worth the trouble. And who's paying to undo all of this? The sovereign grant, the public money keeping royal palaces running, just jumped to £132 million for this year alone, up by more than half compared to the year before. So the same fund that did the place up for the Sussexes is now paying to wipe them out of it. Taxpayers renovated it for them. Taxpayers will now pay to erase them from it. There's a grim little symmetry in that. Keep that £2.4 million in your head for a moment. Every penny of that public money was spent and will come back to exactly where it went. Tom Bower has been watching this cottage saga from the very beginning, and his take is anything but gentle.
With this home still vacant, and with this home basically left as Harry and Meghan left it, there is, of course, always the thought, the fantasy of, oh, we can just come back. But the monarchy is sending Harry and Meghan a very clear sign here. There is no coming back. You can't just waltz back in and waltz back into this house and waltz back into all of our lives as if nothing happened. This house is going to be renovated. It's going to be changed. It's going to be given to somebody else. It's not going to be for you. It's going to be for somebody else.
You know, they are quite literally erasing, expunging every trace of the Duke and Duchess of Duplicity from the royal residences, from the royal estates.
His verdict, stripped right down, is that the Sussexes have gone from the most talked about couple on the planet to a problem the firm simply wants tidied away. And tidying away, it seems, starts with the bricks. Bauer doesn't do polite. He's the investigative biographer behind Revenge, and his newest book, Betrayal, dropped at the very end of March. When he talks about the Sussexes now, the word he keeps reaching for is desperate. On GB News alongside Jacob Rees-Mogg, Bauer argued the couple have reached a point where they are, in his own phrase, desperate for money because their main income source, Netflix, has, in his words, cut them off. He says they're desperate for royal validation too. That's his characterization, not a figure in a ledger, so take it or leave it. But the spine of Bauer's whole argument is this. The fall, he reckons, is now a far more gripping story than the rise ever was, the climb we all watched. It's the slide back down that he finds truly interesting. And here's where Bauer's opinion crashes straight into something you can actually verify, because the money story is real, even if you strip out every last anonymous whisper. Start with Spotify. That deal collapsed in summer 2023 by mutual agreement after the couple delivered exactly one series. Then look at Netflix.
It's very interesting, which I was surprised by, and comes up early in the Betrayal book, is when a very, very famous member of the British establishment, really a household name, is asked by the Queen to explain to Meghan before the wedding what life will be like. And that person goes to visit her every 3 or 4 weeks in Kensington Palace. And after the third and fourth visit, tells the Queen that Meghan has absolutely no intention of staying in Britain after the wedding, and there's a lot of trouble ahead. Of course, it was too late to do anything, but they saw it long before that glorious day in June. And I'm afraid that that is her problem. She is very calculating and very ruthless and very self-promoting, but she's taken on more in the end than she can chew.
That massive headline deal from 2020, reported at up to $100 million, quietly got downgraded last August into a far smaller first-look arrangement. Less money, no exclusivity. The exact same shape of deal the Obamas settled into once the novelty wore off. And it's not like the work was flying off shelves either. Meghan's Netflix series With Love Meghan struggled badly. The first run landed somewhere around 389 on Netflix's own engagement chart for the half year out of roughly 7,000 titles. The follow-ups didn't trouble the top of anything. So when Bauer says the well is running dry, the numbers are sitting right there next to the opinion. And consider just how dramatic this fall actually is. When the Spotify deal collapsed, a senior executive at the company publicly called the pair grifters, which is not the kind of farewell business partners usually offer on the way out. This was a couple who, just a few years earlier, commanded a memoir advance reported at around $20 million for a book that became the fastest-selling work of non-fiction in publishing history.
Biggest problem is still the inclusion of Harry and Meghan as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex on the website. And this would be so easy to remove because they did it for Andrew. And it's time to do it for Harry and Meghan as well.
The money was real once, and it was enormous. That's exactly the point, which is why watching it shrink now feels less like bad luck and more like a tide quietly going out. Picture it. The institutional door is swinging shut at Windsor, and at that very same moment, the money doors are clicking closed one after another out in California. Bauer doesn't think that's a coincidence. He thinks it's a reckoning. And the next door to close had Meghan's own name on it. In March of this year, Netflix walked away from, as ever, Meghan's personal brand, the jam, the flour sprinkles, the wines. Netflix had been standing behind it, and Netflix stepped out. Now, fair is fair. Both sides called the split amicable, and as ever said, it was ready to stand on its own. That very first product dropped back in April 2025 genuinely sold out in about an hour credit where it's due. But line everything up in a row, and the pattern becomes very hard to look away from. Spotify gone, Netflix downgraded, Boeing, which had put serious corporate money behind the Invictus Games, confirmed it won't sponsor the Birmingham Games coming in 2027. The Australian government quietly declined to renew a $9 million commitment to Invictus.
Harry and Meghan spent heavily on turning the property into their family base, and the UK taxpayer had to foot the bill. $3.2 million. This is money that the British people don't have. Imagine the people around me in this great city of London. Here I am in London Bridge. They're working so hard, some of them on the minimum wage, and their taxes were going towards Harry and Meghan's vanity project, improving a perfectly good luxury house because Meghan was in competition with Catherine.
Down under. The chief executive there said his team found out minutes before the budget announcement went live. One income stream after another drying up or simply walking off the pitch. Even the Birmingham Organising Committee has been shaky, with a senior board figure stepping down entirely. Sponsors you could nearly count on one hand, set against a budget running well into the tens of millions. Now that £2.4 million I asked you to hold on to, here's where it went. Into a house they lived in for roughly 10 months, a house they then repaid every single penny of in full back in September 2020. They are not freeloaders on that particular score, and anyone telling you they never paid it back is flatly wrong. That fully repaid, beautifully renovated house then sat completely empty for 3 solid years, and now it's being carved back into flats. £2.4 million of renovation, and the grand plan is to undo all of it. And this is the part that should stop you cold, whatever you think of any of this. Before anyone rushes to say they're completely broke and finished, hold on, they are not destitute. Even the most hostile reporting puts Harry's personal worth somewhere in the tens of millions. That's not the poorhouse. But here's what the pattern actually shows, and it's worse for them than just being broke. It's contraction. This is a couple who walked away from the institution swearing they didn't need it, and who are now standing in Montecito, watching that same institution calmly close every door behind them, while the glittering deals they once counted on thin out, one by one by one.
So, they are keep on seeking opportunities to appear in public, keep on seeking opportunities to promote themselves as great humanists, and keep on making mistakes because they don't realize how complicated the world is and how they're totally ill-equipped to cope with those complications.
Rafe, guess what she thinks is going to turn around the finances now? She's actually launching matchsticks. That's the latest. Look at this. Oh God, matchsticks. Well, I guess it's burning down Frogmore Cottage, at least, that the royal family are intending to do, Rafe.
They wanted out from under the firm. Well, the firm obliged them. It's just that nobody ever told them out meant out for good, with the locks changed and the family home carved back into bedsits the moment their backs were turned. For the longest time, the quiet assumption, even among people close to Harry himself, was that Frogmore was the safety net, the bolt hole. If California ever went sideways, there was always that little house in Windsor to come back to. That assumption is now being knocked down along with the plaster. There is no bolt hole. Once Frogmore becomes flats, there is no Sussex address left anywhere in Britain, not a corner of Windsor with their name on it, not so much as a spare room. And yes, the long tension with William sits behind all of this like weather you can feel but never quite see. The brothers remain estranged, that's been on the record for a long time. There's no shortage of loud commentary about what William might do to the titles the day he becomes king. But honestly, treat most of that as exactly what it is, commentary, not gospel. The more grounded reporting actually leans the other way, suggesting he may leave the titles entirely alone, seeing the Sussexes these days as more of a faded embarrassment than any real threat. But the day-to-day picture writes itself without a single word from him. The heir busy, working, photographed, laughing with his children. The spare an ocean away, watching the last traces of his English life get quietly rearranged for the household staff. Here's what people keep getting wrong about this family.
These two, they don't do their due diligence. They want to show up, they want their picture taken, and they want to get out of Dodge, and they want to sit back and read the praise. I mean, it was like copy and paste for some of the tacky outlets that worship at the ground of Meghan Markle. Meghan Markle's powerful speech was like, I found 5 different websites that literally it had almost the same headline. Meghan Markle gives powerful speech. They don't want to do the work. They don't want to do the research. And I think that that's why they have fallen out with Spotify and in some cases Netflix.
The exploitation of the situation.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked for Meghan when she was in the so-called royal tour, which I described in Betrayal in Nigeria and then in Colombia. And she did, of course, the same when she visited Jordan with the World Health Organization. But Bondi Beach was a terrible, terrible mistake, as was her trip to Australia. She fell flat on her face. And she tries to empathize. Well, she did it, of course, in Texas when the school shooting happened. She flew there to lay some flowers and then ignored her father, who at the same time had a near-death stroke. I mean, everything is for commercial and for personal publicity. I think the Bondi Beach was gross, it was insensitive, but it showed the real Meghan. Anything to earn a dime, anything to promote herself at anyone's expense.
That palace door never slammed. It closed the way a door closes when someone has quietly taken your name off the guest list and simply let you find out later. So what is it all actually for the clearing out, the carving up, the cold and methodical erasing of 2 people from one small house? Tom Bower has an answer, and it's the most chilling part of this entire story, partly because of who said it straight back to him. Bower once stated, out loud and in public, that the monarchy depends on actually obliterating the Sussexes from our state of life. Obliterating from our state of life. And the reason we know for certain those were his exact words, because Harry and Meghan's own spokesperson quoted that line directly back at him. When their team came out swinging at Bower's book, they reached for that precise sentence said it was language that, in their own statement, speaks for itself, and accused him of crossing the line from criticism straight into fixation. So there it sits, confirmed from both sides of the conflict. One man says the institution survives by erasing them. The other side doesn't deny for a second that he said it. They simply think it proves he's gone too far. And right in the middle of that bitter argument sits a small, empty, beautifully renovated house in Windsor Surveyors at the door, plans already drawn up to turn it back into flats. The bolt hole going, the income thinning, the name being scrubbed off the brick. You don't renovate a house you intend to remember somebody by, and that one simple truth cuts through every press release, every carefully worded statement, and every diplomatic non-answer the palace has offered.
And so you have people who are able to watch you and keep an eye on you. And that's why Harry and Meghan, I think, liked the idea of Frogmore Cottage, because they were on a crown estate, but they weren't under the umbrella and the watchful eye of the monarchy. And the monarchy can't let them do that. And so they stripped them of it because they proved they can't be trusted. They used pictures and videos and images from that home in their Netflix documentary. And that, of course, is violating security for sort of everyone. That's the thing. Harry and Meghan violate security for everyone in order to promote themselves.
This was never really about square footage or staff accommodation. It was about making absolutely certain there is nothing left standing to come back to. But let's go deeper than the bricks, because the Frogmore story, as dramatic as it is really just the most visible symbol of something far bigger that has been quietly unfolding for years now. To truly understand what is happening to the Sussexes in 2025, you have to understand the 3 pillars they built their independence on when they walked away: institutional identity, financial power, and public narrative. And what we are watching right now, in real time, is all 3 of those pillars cracking simultaneously. Start with institutional identity, because this one is the most underrated piece of the whole puzzle. When Harry and Meghan stepped back in January 2020, they didn't just leave a job, they left a framework, a centuries-old structure that tells the world exactly who you are and why you matter.
King Charles is conceding here that Prince William is right about the fact that the Sussexes simply can never return to the United Kingdom in any form, can never have any royal role again. Their home, the place that they wanted to keep as some sort of base in the United Kingdom paid for by us, is going to go back to being multiple cottages because simply it is not fit for them to return.
But yes, I think the messaging here is quite clear. There is no place for them within the royal household, within the royal entourage, no matter how much they try to portray themselves as pseudo-royals.
Every royal engagement, every official visit, every carefully managed public appearance comes with the full weight of that institution standing behind it. It opens doors, it generates credibility, it makes governments return calls and brands write checks. The Sussex brand, post-Megxit, was built on the idea that their personal star power could replace all of that, that they were bigger than the institution, that the name recognition alone was currency enough. For a while, it genuinely looked like they might be right. The Netflix deal, the Spotify deal, the memoir advance, the Oprah interview, the docu-series, the packed speaking engagement calendars. It looked, from the outside, like a couple who had successfully converted royal fame into genuine independent power, and the media, particularly in America, was largely happy to play along, treating them as a kind of celebrity royalty, the glamorous, progressive alternative to the stuffy old palace across the ocean.
His father might be a little bit softer. There's a whole load of reasons for that. But William is absolutely categorical that Harry and Meghan just have to be banished. You know, they have to live in exile. And William's going to be furious if the government and this Ravek committee give him the security protection back, because that means Harry can swan in and swan out whenever he wants.
We've seen how mediocre and miserable their trip was to Australia in terms of raising money. We saw the huge embarrassment for Meghan when she went to see the very sensible Swiss in Geneva, and she had enough people there to fill a British phone box. Nobody is interested in them any longer.
That was terrible. 10 people showed up. Well, 10 fans showed up. There were like a few journalists and stuff.
But here's what that version of the story always missed. Celebrity without institutional backing is a rapidly perishable product. It has a shelf life, and that shelf life is directly tied to your ability to keep generating new, compelling content that the public actually wants to consume. The moment the output slows, the moment the controversies stop feeling fresh, the moment audiences move on to the next shiny thing, the whole apparatus starts to wobble. And wobble it absolutely has. Think about the actual content output since the big Netflix docuseries dropped in December 2022. That series itself was polarizing enormous viewing figures on one side, enormous backlash on the other. Then came Spare in January 2023, which broke sales records but simultaneously burned what remained of the bridge back to the family. Then With Love, Meghan on Netflix, which landed somewhere around 389th on their own engagement rankings out of roughly 7,000 titles. Then the As Ever brand launch, which did sell out in an hour, but then watched Netflix walk away from the partnership entirely. Each chapter has been progressively smaller than the last. Each headline has carried a little less voltage than the one before it. And the public appetite, particularly in the UK, has shifted in ways that are genuinely difficult to reverse.
I've never seen somebody try so hard to prove that they're not the most unpopular person in the world.
Someone who fled England because she needed her privacy.
Yeah.
Never let us forget that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, it's absolutely astonishing. And then, of course, the publication of all her very top secret wedding photographs.
Oh, yeah.
To mark the 8th anniversary. That as well, absolutely another invasion of her privacy. I mean, she is literally digging and digging and digging, looking for something to get attention, and probably can't understand why there isn't a huge wave of adoration for her. She's actually puzzled why people don't love her, and that makes it even more interesting.
Polling throughout 2024 showed Harry's popularity in Britain sitting at historic lows, numbers that no amount of carefully managed positive press is going to shift overnight. The goodwill that carried him through the early post-Megxit years, the sense that people felt protective of him as someone who had struggled within the institution, that goodwill has largely evaporated. What replaced it, particularly after Spare, is something far colder, not hatred, exactly. More like exhaustion, a national shrug. Now pivot to the financial picture, because this is where the story gets genuinely complicated in ways that most coverage flattens out. The Sussexes are not broke, let's be completely straight about that. Harry's personal wealth, built from his mother's inheritance, his military service earnings, and the proceeds of his various deals, is substantial. Estimates consistently place his net worth somewhere north of £10 million, possibly considerably more. Meghan came into the marriage with her own career earnings. These are not people choosing between heating and eating, but
this story is actually more significant than it may seem, because it is the royal family quite clearly drawing a line. It's making it clear, is it not, Rafe, that we simply do not want them, but also that the royal family simply do not want them. Because of course, if Operation Thaw was real, the obvious place for Harry and Meghan to return would have been Frogmore Cottage. And despite spending all of that money, Rafe, it's literally about to be bulldozed. At least the renovations will be, because it's going to be turned back into, I believe, multiple flats for effectively senior members of the household, which is what it was before Harry and Meghan lived there.
wealth and cash flow are two very different things. And what the pattern of the last 18 months shows is not a couple running out of money, it's a couple whose incoming revenue streams are contracting faster than their outgoing costs. The Spotify deal gone. The Netflix headline deal downgraded to a first-look arrangement with a fraction of the original value. Boeing pulling out of Invictus sponsorship. Australia declining to renew its $9 million Invictus commitment. The Birmingham Invictus Games running lean on sponsors against a budget that needs tens of millions to function properly. And the Invictus piece matters more than people realize, because that was always Harry's most unimpeachable asset, the one project that sat entirely outside the royal drama, that had genuine charitable credibility, that even his harshest critics found difficult to attack. Invictus was the one thing that made people say, whatever you think of everything else, that part is genuinely good. The moment that starts showing financial strain, the moment corporate partners start quietly stepping back, something important shifts. It's no longer just the entertainment deals looking shaky, it's the crown jewel showing cracks. Here's the strategic problem that nobody in the Sussex camp seems to have fully solved yet. In order to generate the kind of serious, sustainable income that funds the Montecito lifestyle, the Archwell Foundation, the security costs, the staffing, and the Invictus machinery, you need either institutional backing or a genuinely scalable commercial enterprise. The institution is gone.
She made some very, very poor strategic errors, thinking she could profit from the title without any consequence, without paying the dues. And of course, in the end, I have no doubt there'll come a day when they both lose their titles, and their children too, because they will just be forced to go too far for their own survival, and at that moment, the same will happen to them as what's happened to Prince Andrew.
And the commercial enterprises, the Netflix content, the Spotify podcast, the brand partnerships have all proven far harder to scale than the initial announcements suggested. What's left is the speaking circuit, which does generate real money, and the As Ever brand, which is genuinely interesting as a long-term play but is still in its very earliest stages. Neither of those, on their own, replaces what the headline deals were worth at their peak. Now let's talk about the narrative pillar, because this might actually be the most consequential one. When the Sussexes left, they had a story, a powerful one. A story about a woman who was failed by an institution that should have protected her, about a man who chose love and mental health over duty and tradition, about a couple brave enough to walk away from one of the most famous families in the world and build something new on their own terms. That story had real emotional power. It connected with real people who had their own experiences of institutions that let them down, families that didn't accept them, systems that ground them down. The Oprah interview was the peak of that narrative. It reached an estimated 49 million viewers globally. It was perfectly timed, emotionally devastating in places, and it put the palace so far on the back foot that the entire royal communications machine spent months scrambling to respond. From a pure storytelling standpoint, it was a masterclass. But here's the brutal truth about narratives: they have to keep moving forward, or they start collapsing backward. A story about escaping and building something new only works as long as the something new is visibly being built. The moment the construction stalls, the moment the deals dry up and the projects underperform and the cultural relevance fades, the story stops being about brave independence and starts being about something far less flattering. And the people who were always skeptical, the ones who thought the whole thing was a calculated brand exercise from day one, get louder and louder as the counter-evidence piles up. Which brings us back, inevitably, to Tom Bower. Because love him or despise him, and the Sussexes team clearly despises him, he identified something early that has only become more visible with time. His central thesis has never really been about whether Harry and Meghan are good or bad people. It's about whether the project they launched was ever genuinely sustainable, whether the calculation that personal charisma plus royal name recognition could generate indefinite independent power was ever actually sound. And the accumulating evidence, brick by brick, deal by deal, empty house by empty house, is making that thesis harder and harder to dismiss. The palace, for its part, has been almost eerily disciplined in its response to all of this. No dramatic statements, no public confrontations, no briefings designed to humiliate, or at least none that can be traced directly back. Just a slow, methodical withdrawal of every practical support structure that once surrounded the Sussexes. The residence, gone. The working relationship, gone. The security arrangements, reduced. The titles for the children, technically maintained but practically meaningless without the framework that would give them substance. It is the most effective kind of institutional response because it requires no drama. It simply requires patience. And institutions, by their very nature, are extraordinarily patient. There's a word for what the palace is doing, and it's a word that gets used in military strategy and in business and in long-term institutional politics. It's called attrition. You don't confront the problem directly. You don't give it the dramatic confrontation it might actually benefit from. You simply remove, one by one, every resource and every lifeline, and you wait. You let the environment do the work for you. And when the historians eventually write about this period, the story of Frogmore Cottage will be one of the clearest illustrations of that strategy in action. A house that cost the public £2.4 million to build up, then sat empty for 3 years, and is now being carved back into staff bedsits, not out of spite, officially, but out of practical necessity. The most devastating kind of erasure. The kind that doesn't even need to admit its erasure. So what happens next? That's the question hanging over everything, and honestly, the honest answer is that nobody knows for certain. There are genuine paths forward for the Sussexes that don't depend on the institution or on entertainment deals. The As Ever brand, if it scales properly, could become a real and lasting business. The speaking circuit, if they choose their engagements carefully, can sustain a significant income. Harry has spoken publicly about mental health advocacy work that doesn't require Netflix or Spotify to have value. These are real options, not consolation prizes. But, and this is the part that the most optimistic Sussex coverage tends to skip over, all of those paths require a level of quiet, consistent, unglamorous work that looks very different from the launch and announcement cycle that has characterized the last 5 years. It requires building something slowly, without the institutional shortcut, without the explosive headline deal, without the Oprah moment to reset the narrative when things get difficult. It requires, in other words, exactly the kind of patient, long-term construction that the palace has proven so much better at than almost anyone else on earth. The institution has been doing this for over 1,000 years. It has outlasted every crisis, absorbed every scandal, and watched every challenger eventually run out of road. It is not sentimental. It is not cruel, at least not openly. It is simply durable in a way that individual human beings, with their careers and their brands and their carefully managed public images, almost never are. And in a quiet corner of Windsor, the surveyors are measuring up the rooms. The copper bath is probably already marked for removal. The 5 bedrooms that once housed a duke and a duchess and their future are being penciled back into something more modest, more functional, more anonymous. The last physical address, the last piece of England with their name on it, going back to what it was before they arrived. You do not renovate a house you intend to remember somebody by, and you do not carve it back into bedsits unless you are very, very certain that the people who live there are not coming back. So now it's over to you. Should the palace come out and just say it plainly that there is no road back for the Sussexes, or keep carrying on with this slow, silent, methodical clearing out behind closed doors? Which approach do you think is more honest? Which one is more damaging in the long run? Drop your verdict in the comments. Every single one gets read, and this is genuinely one of those topics where the audience is sharply divided and every perspective matters. If this story gave you something to think about, hit that like button. It makes a real difference in getting these deeper dives in front of people who actually care about them. Subscribe so you're here when the next chapter drops. Share this with someone who thinks they already know the full Sussex story, because there is a very strong chance they don't. The next video goes right inside what is actually left of the Sussex business empire once you strip away all the headlines and the announcements and the carefully worded statements. The numbers, the real ones, are more revealing than anything anyone has said publicly. See you there.